First impression of the table read, I'm still processing it. You know, it's great. It's very exciting to hear the words come alive. You know, and you know, you hear nuances. You know, it's great when you hear a nuance that you were hoping to hear, and then they do it on their own. That's fantastic. And then when you hear a nuance that you weren't expecting, you're like, oh, that's also fantastic. You know, and you know, you get a lot about the nature of the choices you make as a writer, but then the choices they make as an actor can frequently be different, and it adds a lot to it. And it's just, it's pretty. It's great. After hearing it read, you know, I'm still figuring out what I want to do, but there are certain lines that I know I want to cut. There are certain scenes I want to rework a little bit, and you know, but also there's certain scenes that I know I'm going to be sticking to my guns on because they worked really well. You know, and so there's always something you want to change, but this helped to, you know, make me make some more, I guess, educated decisions, I hope. As far as characters and the which ones I want to keep or condense or whatever, I'm still going to figure that out. But I found like some of the characters had very strong agendas that came through, and others were a bit wishy-washy, and that's on me, you know. And so I wanted to either strengthen their agenda or find a way to just diminish their role a little bit more. So, oh God, you know, it's funny because when I was a kid, I remember being in 5th grade. And there was some school assignment, and I was writing prose, and I used the word plummeted. The airplane plummeted to the sky, you know, to the ground. It was a plane crash, you know. And it's like, I remember as a 5th grader saying, ooh, that's a big word. And I liked it. And then later when we read it aloud in class, you know, I said, the airplane plummeted, and they're like, ooh, what's that mean? You know. And there was something about that. I just had a love of words early. And I've always been writing in some form or another. It turned into movie writing, and you know, so I guess I was born with a pen in my hand, it felt like, so. Well, my initial plan was novels, you know, and actually I was, even though it's an entirely different genre, I'm a big Stephen King fan, and the first adult novel I ever read was The Shining, and so when I was like 13, it scarred me for life, you know, and then I read a whole bunch of other Stephen King novels, and I realized, like, you know what, as I was growing up older, like as a teenager and stuff, I was thinking, I would love to do what Stephen King did, write great books that make it into movies and then make good movies. And then eventually I realized, like, well, if I want to go into movies to begin with, why not just start there? So I just basically put my emphasis on movies. Okay. Yeah, well, I've written mainly features and a couple shorts, but I've probably written a couple dozen scripts. Well, the evolution of this script was pretty strange for me because it was opposite the way I normally write. And I was trying to write a screenplay that was something else, and I was stuck. I was holed up in a cabin, the same cabin that is in this movie, actually. And I was holed up in this cabin trying to make a screenplay work, and it wasn't going anywhere. And I was working for days with no progress, and I was stuck. So I gave myself an exercise, and I said, I'm just going to turn off my brain, I'm going to turn on the computer, and just see what comes out. And the first scene in this movie is what came out. Wow. And it even starts with a writer staring at a blank screen, and there's a blinking word, which is stuff I usually hate in movies, but I put it in there anyway. And so at the end of that scene, I was like, wow, I sort of like that. What might happen next? And then I thought of this character, and then I moved on, and the story of Jen started coming alive. And it was just one scene after another, and it was not an old idea that was stuck in my head. It was just, I allowed the scene to create the next scene. And it just built and built and built. And a few hours into this, I realized, like, I'm writing much more than I thought I would, and I'm not going to go to bed until I figure out how this ends. And like literally within like 6 hours, I was done with. I got to the end. Wow. It was crazy, and but it flowed. You know, it's interesting. As a guy writing a woman's character, I didn't really approach it that way, because at the time I was creating the story, I was just thinking of what would logically happen from the story, what would go next. And when I realized that I was starting to write about this author's wife, you know, the widow of a suicide, it's like, what would go through her mind? And there's a lot of, whether you're dealing with grief or isolation or insecurity, or, you know, the whole gamut of emotions that are going around, it became much more of an emotionally driven story anyway, regardless of whether it's a guy or a girl. And most guy movies in Hollywood are all action driven, like a guy sets out to go do something. And in this story, it was more about feeling your way through this healing process. And I didn't want to make it sad or depressing or focus on the death or anything like that. I wanted to make it more like, this is someone who's really fighting for sense in her life. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. You know, you're going to fight in a certain way. And her way was an emotional way. So I was just thinking in those terms. And so I didn't think about it as far as writing a woman. It was just writing someone who's coming to terms with her emotions. My training, I started to study film when I was an undergrad at the University of Michigan. And then I wound up studying at a few other film schools as well. I went to NYU for a summer, Hunter College in New York for a year, and UCLA for a summer as well. So I like to say I got a film degree from University of Michigan, but a film education everywhere else. And then after that I moved to LA and to work in production, and I wound up working a variety of production jobs, and including what turned out to be a 6-year job working for a director as his assistant and development person. And by working development for him, I read a ton of scripts, learned a lot. I was also acting in an acting workshop aside, so I learned it from the actor's perspective as well. So it just combined things. So it was a combination of education and practical experience. Well, other than the table read, I've blocked everything else out. I don't know. No, at the Austin Festival, I mean, this I've never been here before at the Austin Film Festival, and it's fantastic. I mean, they celebrate screenwriting rather than just treat it like an afterthought or a secondary issue with filmmaking. It's actually the core of filmmaking here at this festival, and it's fantastic because every panel, every film, every aspect of it is a strong writer core to it, and you can meet seasoned Hollywood professionals or emerging writers, and everyone's on the same level, and we're all just celebrating the craft of screenwriting. So I'm just in like a writer's haze right now. Like, oh, look at me, I'm so happy. I met Jeff Nichols, who I'm a big fan of his work, and got a little man crush on Jeff Nichols.
Great.
And there's others too. I met a few people I was very thrilled to get some time with and chat with a little bit. I'd say the greatest value of a table read just comes from hearing the actors interpret your words. It's one thing to hear them say the words, but they could be just reading it. But when they're actually diving in, as they do in a table read, they're actually giving life to it, giving emotion to it, giving timing and rhythm and pacing to it. You can hear when they stumble over a word and you realize that, oh, I overwrote that line. Or you can hear if they're plowing through something, there's something fundamentally in the scene connected, and that's good. But if they're trying to search for meaning, then you know that, okay, something fundamental is missing from that scene. You have to go back and figure it out. So for me, I get a lot of pacing and rhythm and choices really come clear after hearing the actors perform it. If you're a writer, if you're a director, if you're any kind of filmmaker at all, I highly recommend you, come to whatever festival you can. If you can't make it to Austin, then go anywhere else. But come to Austin. It's a great hub of just filmmaking joy. But if you have the opportunity to table read your screenplays, absolutely do. And so thank you for giving me this opportunity too.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for coming, and congratulations again for being a Grand Prize winner of the Table Read My Screenplay contest for your feature open book.
Thank you.